So, good afternoon. My name is Murthy YLR, as in Yellow London Red. Murthy YLR. I am a professor of marketing at IIM Bangalore. We are here today to hold a panel discussion on retail branding, and we have three of our friends, experts in the domain, who are here, and we have representations from academics as well as industry. We'll first go to our friends from the industry, and let me introduce the two guests there. First, let me introduce Jay Suresh. Say hi, Suresh.
Hi.
Okay. He's the CEO and MD, Arvind Fashions. He managed Calvin Klein, US Polo, Gap, Sephora.
Actually, just correction, Weiler, I just retired. Now it's 2 months.
So. You must be advising them. I'm sure they won't let you go just like that. Are you not
advising them, but not as MD and CEO. No, as MD and CEO, I retired.
Right.
Months back.
So you're in the vestibule. Got it. He was for 18 years in HUL. He was the CEO of MTR Foods for some time, and he's an MBA from IIM Bangalore, from our institute. And then we have my good friend, Mr. Vasant Kumar, who is currently Senior Advisor, Samara Capital. He was with the Max Lifestyle Group for a very long time. In fact, he managed all of them: Max Fashions, Max Lifestyle, Easy Buy. He conceptualized Easy Buy, which is a very interesting thing in that space. Before that, he was at several other marquee companies like Majra Garments, where he managed Louis Philippe, Van Heusen, Alan Solly, etc. And before that, Unilever, TTK, and so on. He is an MBA from XLRI, Jamshedpur, and I come to my colleague and friend, Professor Ashish Mishra. He is a professor of marketing here at IIM Bangalore, and he has been with us since 2004. And before that, he worked in two good colleges, which is TAPMI and XLRI Jamshedpur. He is currently the chairperson of admissions. Am I right, sir? Powerful man.
Yes.
Powerful man. So off we go. I'll start with our questions, and I'll start first with Mishra ji, and then we can go to Suresh and then Vasant. Mishra ji, how do you build a strong retail brand?
There is no magic pill for building any brand, and retail is no difference. So when you're talking about a strong retail brand, I'll tell you, all of us know that a brand means something that is a promise of a manufacturer to deliver something consistently over a period of time. And when consumers accept that, then we end up building a brand. So by nature of this definition, what it means is we are talking about a period of time over here. You have to have something, whether it is quality, whether it is price, whether it is durability, whatever is the characteristic I'm talking about. So then build it up over a period of time, and then people accept it and you are known for it. So this is something a manufacturer that traditionally we associate with it. Now, the interesting thing is when we're talking about retail is a combination of bunch of manufacturers. So it is not one particular brand. So if you're talking about Madura, or when you're talking about Max or whatever, you're talking about one set of brands of that particular company. But when you're talking about a Walmart, or when you're talking about a Tesco, or talking about erstwhile Big Bazaar, now Reliance, we're talking about an assembly of brands, which in technical terms we call merchandising. So when we're talking about building a strong brand in retail, that means the principle is the same now. What the retailer stands for, and that delivering it successfully over a period of time, which eventually the customers accept. So that is how it is going to be building a brand.
Right.
Now the question over here is, what is unique to retail that a manufacturer misses? So manufacturer has the option of only one set of things that particular manufacturer manufactures. We have the case of HUL, who wanted to go online. And then one of the bigger things over there is whether the portfolio is enough for the customer. Now, that kind of challenge is not there when you're talking about a Big Bazaar or a Reliance Retail. So they have HUL brands, they have Patanjali brands, they have Colgate brands. So they can create the customer engagement. And this is something that makes the retailer unique in comparison to a manufacturer. And this is something the retailer has to use it to build a strong brand. So what the retailer has to do? Create an assembly which the target consumer identifies, target consumer connects, and then build around that to tell a nice story to the customer, which they would like to listen. So on a principle level, sir, it doesn't change. Branding means you're telling a strong story, which consumers believe in,
right,
which consumer connects.
20,000 feet, it's not much different. One is there is an assembly of brands and your ability to convert that into a proposition. Great.
Proposition.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Suresh, is retail branding very different from FMCG branding or any other B2B or whatever? How? Because you have been in this waters for a long time. So what's your view on this?
Yes, while I have handled quite a set of fairly large brands, and then set of retail brands. There's a subtle difference, while ultimately brand is building that promise in the minds of the consumer, and then in a way, for me, you utter the name of the brand, the person should be delighted to hear that brand and use that brand. I mean, that I think holds true whether it's a product brand or whether it's a retail brand. But if you really look at how you build a retail brand, so sometime back or even now, when you ask about retail, they will always say that no, it's always location, and location. So you just focus on getting the right location. You put a retail store there. It's likely that you will get good customers, and then you will build a brand along that. I think there are many successful brands which has been built with the right location. That I think is now given, and in a way it is a hygiene for building any retail brand. Location is a hygiene. Now, then how typically a retail builds the brand. What I call that as a EST principle. EST meaning EST, BEST.
EST model. Yeah.
EST model. So if you really look at it, there are 5 EST principles on which you can build a retail brand. Someone can be the cheapest. For example, Walmart, or in the Indian context, Big Bazaar, they actually strive for the cheapest. You may buy brands from different, it could be from P&G, it could be from Hindustan Lever, but when you go and buy a Hindustan Lever, say Fair and Lovely, you assume that because of the overarching branding of Big Bazaar, you get the lowest price of Fair and Lovely in Big Bazaar. So it's the cheapest principle. So that is one EST. The EST could be the latest, which could be like hottest or latest, which is all about fashion. Zara, I think, is a very good example of the latest, because they keep churning constantly new products. Of course, now there are many brands, but that is another principle on which you can actually buy. You can build a retail brand. Then there is you got the nearest or the quickest, which is more on the convenience. If you take our typical Kirana stores, you can say that they're all built more on being quickest to get. You want to get something immediately, just walk across. Most part of the country, you'll get something within 100 yards to 200 yards. So that is something which is built on. For example, McDonald's is another good example where it's available, omnipresent, and you can always drop in and then buy and also get it quickly. So it's not just the reach being quicker, but also you get your service pretty quickly. So that is the other. Then the other one is easiest. There are some brands which actually organize themselves for the ease of the consumers. They buy it easily. For example, Target, when they came in vis-a-vis Walmart, actually they focused on that principle, saying that Walmart is all about a little bit of a dingy aisles and narrow aisles and all that, and here I make a wider aisle, very nicely lit up, very nicely signage given for each and every section, so that it's easy for the consumer to buy. In a way, the department stores in India provide that kind of a convenience. You are well lit. It's all, sections are very clear if it's a menswear or a women's wear. And the brands are very, very clearly demarcated and displayed and sold. So in a way, department store actually is built on that principle of easy, making things easy for the consumer. Then the last one is the largest. Typically, the specialty retailers are largest because they go deep. For example, Walmart may sell in a 200,000 square feet, maybe 20,000 to 30,000 or even 50,000 categories. Whereas if you go for a specialty retailer, they will focus on one category, go really deep on it. Typically, if you take a Home Stop or a home center, kind of a context in the Indian context, they are specialty retail. They go deep. You may get some home stuff in big bazaar, but you will not get as much deep as what you will get in a specialty retail. So typically, these are the way you build a retail brand. But I must say that this is little bit I would say as we go forward or even today, it is slowly becoming outdated. Because how do you define Amazon, for example? But that is something, in an online world, how this principle changes in retail branding is a completely different topic. Probably we'll address it, in the subsequent.
We'll address that. Yeah. Vasant, I remember you telling us that location is one thing that you don't really worry about for Max. Yeah, I remember you were saying that at one point of time, if I remember that right. So how are you? Would you say that that's an important thing, or are there other important things? If so, what are they?
No, what I said is, in context, the so-called prime retailing location is not required. Right, as long as you are in the vicinity and able to stand apart, you will be able to get your customers. So that's what I said. Retail definitely is about location. Strong location is not going to save any brand. So that way, you need to be in the vicinity where you can pull in customers. The question which you asked on strong retail brand, see, overall, if you look at Ashish and Suresh has already covered bulk of what it is in terms of building strong retail brand. I can add to that, if you are saying that you are a retail brand, what it means is you are, as Ashish put it, you are having a compelling offering. The focus is on offering. The focus is on range. The focus is on experience. So if a customer comes to your store, generally retail brands are all store brands. They are controlling the store. So in the store, are you able to give them outstanding range, outstanding experience for that target customer? So that will make the retail brand. So consequently, it's important for the retail brand to exclude customers who are not relevant to them and then go and hone into the right people. If they end up trying to attract everybody, they will not be able to have a strong retail brand delivery. Whereas the manufacturer brand or power brand, as we say, in fact, Suresh has managed power brands. So he is in best position to tell. I also have managed in the earlier Madura lifestyle venues and all. There, the focus is offering lifestyle solution. You have to select one particular lifestyle of a customer and ensure you properly solve the problem. And generally, that is solved through innovation and branding. These are the two things. There, the focus is on not on range and experience and all that. Are you solving certain lifestyle problem well? And are you delivering it through constant innovation and branding? Whereas a retail brand, the question we ask is, are you giving a compelling range, compelling offering, which gives outstanding experience when a particular target? So this is how we see context, and both the entities will coexist. And where they are sort of merging or blurring with each other is as the whole industry is moving towards omni and phygital. So both the power brands as well as retail brands are becoming omni or becoming phygital. So in that respect, they overlap with each other when reaching.
So let me ask this, Ashish, this is like, how do you build a retail experience? I'll just take it from where what do we have? A few elements of how you build a retail great retail experience. Yeah.
The retail experience, as you said earlier, we are focusing on the store part over here. So if I quote a paper of Ailavadi and Keller, 2000 of retailing. So they're talking about retail outlet image, or retail outlet image depends upon access, in-store atmosphere, price and promotion, cross-category product and service assortment, and within category brand or item assortment. So this is something that they're talking about in terms of in-store image. And we have our consumer behavior theory, which talks about when individual image matches with the store image, you are likely to patronize that, the congruence theory, that you are more likely to patronize that store. So that is the starting point of building retail experience, that each of the elements, identify each of the elements of a retail store and try to connect it to the customer. But the more important thing increasingly that is coming up is how they connect together. Individually, I may have a great assortment. I may have a great category also. I may be having the best price points and all that. But am I telling a compulsive story? Am I telling a good offering? And the key to this increasingly, as we are seeing, is engaging with the customer. See, if I'm talking about people with resources, whatever Amazon can offer, Flipkart can offer, whatever Walmart can offer, Reliance can offer. So I don't think that way there is a big difference in terms of each of these parameters. Each of these 5 factors that they identify, probably everybody, I mean, everybody of a particular level, they will be able to offer this. But where we can make a difference is how you engage with the customer. Right. So the customer engagement is probably the key to providing customers with experience. It is something like an IKEA model, that do it yourself kind of thing, that where you build it up and you connect with the store, you connect with the customer, and in a way that is something that builds up your necessity, your congruence, your society, and building up. It is more like a cult. You are building a cult, you are building a society around your offerings. I think that is the key. And this will become more important when we talk about the online that world. But to answer your question simply, it is that the basic principle is same: identify the customer and provide them with their offering.
Yeah. That again goes back to the branding story, right?
And here it is that how you are engaging with the customer. Does the customer feel that this is my store? Do I connect with this store? Is it for me? And do they care for me? I think that is the kind of questions that we'll be looking.
Great. Vasant, same question to you. Just 2 parts. One part is, what from your experience, what are the elements you have identified? Okay. For instance, Suresh has given 5 ways and so on. So what are the paths to building a great experience? And tell us 1 or 2 interesting Indian or even global examples of which have built this very well.
Essentially, when you have to build any brand, more so for retail brand, you should be very clear on what you don't want to do. Suppose you take a target customer, and that target customer's aspirations, interests, and all, if you have a clear knowledge, you go about servicing it in a transparent manner, so that the customer knows what you expect. And the biggest challenge in retail brand is being consistent in across time period. Typically, what happens is fashion apparel, there are seasons where there may be ups and downs. Now, you should not pass down your internal pressures in terms of sales volume to the customer. If you are saying you are promoting in a consistent way, suppose Walmart says everyday low price, they will maintain that so that customers know that there is certain category of product they can go and trust and then keep buying it. If you say Target, in Target they are aiming for a customer base which is a shade more evolved than Walmart.
Right.
So they will not go for 99 jeans. They will never attempt it. Okay. There you go for certain one-ups with certain fashion signature. And there, the loyalty programs themselves will be a little more refined to connect with the customers. Their event which they sponsor, the CSR programs, the quality of training that goes into the staff, everything will talk about one DNA. It's like you have residential apartments, communities and all. Each community will be different. They would have costed the same, or little difference will be there. But once you go there, you will know whether you're connecting with the community or not, the way they behave. So retail brand should encourage the community coherence and not disturb that, and build it over a period of time. Typically, the building will happen over 2 decades. So you should be able to patiently do it for 2 decades without what you call tripping. Then you make a success of it.
Yeah, Suresh, question is in the same thing, but tell me what are the, because you were also with foods for some time. So is there any difference in terms of how you build the story for food or groceries, or, because that's also, of course, you're right. You have been for the longest time probably in fashion. You also, so maybe you can give us some contrast.
More in food. So more in food. I think, see, for me, how do you create experience? Whatever it is, I think it's important that the retail space actually should screen the brand proposition. For example, I enter the retail. I should be able to immediately understand that this brand. For example, I'll just give a couple of examples. One is purely a retail, and the other one is I would say, like what Vasant said, lifestyle retail. One of the brands which we do is US Polo. When we do the retail of US Polo, whether it is in a standalone store or in a shop in a department store, the most important thing is we stand for the game of polo. We stand for a merchandise which in a way is used by the players who play polo. So it's aspirational because not many people play the game, but it's very aspirational. So the entire showroom is set up like the way a polo player's wardrobe is set up. For example, there is a merchandise which the polo player uses while playing the game. There is a merchandise which a polo audience actually looks at when they come to watch a polo match. Then when there is an after match party, there is a certain merchandise which is paid. So you actually when you enter the store, you feel that you are in a polo playground, and then the entire merchandise is organized that way. So I think very, very important that the experience should be such that it is communicating the brand proposition pretty strongly to the consumer. For example, Professor mentioned about IKEA, how they do it. If you really look at it, for example, see, it's all about do it yourself. It's all about building your own, I would say, interiors. So they have something called showrooms. So that I think is the most crucial part of the store. So you, for example, you want to have a single bedroom bachelor kind of a setup you wanted to have. They will have a showroom where actually that will be set up. If it is a small 100 square feet bachelorette kind of a space, you want to buy furniture, you can just go to that showroom, understand how it is set up, and then actually buy, and then set up your room in line with that. So it's again communicating the brand proposition, and every corner you look at it, they will say two things. One is to what extent or what length they go to get the products at the lowest price. Second is what are the actions or what are the things they are doing in terms of improving the design all the time, because that is a very, very important proposition of IKEA, that it's not just the price, it's also about the design. So they invest a lot in creating designs which suits a certain space. So it's important that you sort of screen the brand proposition. And if you take the food, it is no different. If you go to Starbucks, whether it's a music, whether they don't ask you to go out, even if you're not buying a cup of coffee, you can sit there and do your work right through the day, because they say that it's a home away from your home. So they create an experience that way. So whether it is food, whether it is you have to necessarily create an experience which sort of screens the brand, so that consumer quickly understands that, yeah, this is a brand, and quickly understand the brand proposition. So that actually builds that loyalty. Or suppose you're bought into that experience, then you keep repeating, or keep coming to that store. Of course, again, in the online world, those things are changing.
Yeah.
So I will come back to that. Otherwise, no, because you can't, differentiate between offline and online.
Correct.
So it's very difficult to keep that boundaries. But online world is again, in a way changing, some of the things, which I just mentioned.
Right. Ashish, you want to say something? Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to add a little more to the food thing that Suresh has been thinking about. So the food is a little different than apparels in the sense that food is a little more experiential. If you're looking at the kind of food stores we are talking about, there one kind of store where the stuff. That is, for a Big Bazaar kind of a store, I'm not going to expect anything innovative or different or anything like this. On the other hand, if I'm going to a Nature's Basket or a food hall kind of a store, then I'm going to expect something different. So, for example, if I'm looking at potato, then Big Bazaar, I'm looking at regular potatoes and regular price points. But I'm talking about a Nature's Basket or a food hall kind of a thing. I'm probably say 10 varieties of potatoes. Say for example, chili. I'll see one type of chili or two types of chili in a Big Bazaar kind of a store. Whereas if I'm going to a little gourmet kind of a store, same again, food hall or Nature's Basket and all, then we'll be talking about 10 varieties of chili. So the experience in Big Bazaar driven. What is there? It is available. I'll pick it up quickly, and how quickly I can get out of it. I don't have to wait long time in the queue, and merchandise availability, the quality of the product, the consistency, all those kind of things will come into customer experience. Whereas if you're going to a gourmet kind of a store, little high-end store, I don't mind paying a little price. At that time, it becomes experiential. So you're telling me there are 10 varieties of chili, but what do I do with it?
It's a proposition which you experience, in the store. I think one good example of a very good, experiential store in food is a brand called Eataly. That is EATLY. Yeah. Actually, their showroom is organized under different regions. It could be a Mediterranean region, it could be a Mexican region, it could be an Indian region, it could be a Chinese region. So they cook food of these regions with the ingredients present there. You can buy and eat there also as fresh food. At the same time, you can go and pick up the ingredients, which is sort of set up within that section in which they cook that particular region's food. So, because their proposition is basically the global, food experience. So that is their proposition. That's how they have set up their retail.
Right. Vasant, any interesting experiences, retail experiences, which were built either in India or abroad, from your?
If you have seen in international market, if you go to malls, premium fashion malls, you will see the whole setup portraying a particular lifestyle. And even the, employees will also live the lifestyle.
Okay.
So that what they are saying is that when you come here, you are part of this particular social spectrum with this kind of consumption habits and this kind of lifestyle, holiday and work environment, and hence you buy this. Successfully, if you see in US, the way Gap has done a Banana Republic for the high-end, Gap for the premium mid, and then for Old Navy at the value. You can see everything different, right? From employees to the ambience to the merchandise to the location where it is retailed, and then the whole ecosystem. And that if you go to even toy shops, you have in Hamleys, and then you have when you go there, you will see. Everything is meant for the kids. So you have to, even adult goes there, they will be, they have to imagine themselves as a kid and then go around the shop. Then only they will be able to enjoy, and that's what they want. And you see adults transforming. Similarly, there are chocolate shops where when you go there, they build a house of chocolate and they'll have different visual merchandising, and even the staff also enjoying in the whole process of chocolate selling. So the lifestyle retailing, which is slowly starting in India, is far evolved in the West. And the advantage is you can then slice different customer profiles, and for each one of them, you can address very well and make the customer gladly fork out money and buy. So that is how I see. And lifestyle retailing is yet to be exploited in India. And I think over the next 5 to 10 years, India also will have that kind of high quality experiential retailing.
So, Vasant, I'll continue with you. What do you think works in India in retail? What doesn't? Because if you look at the last 50, 20 years of the number of chains that closed down is manifold more than the number of chains that are still around. And many of them actually legged along because they had the ability to, they had the kitty.
Yeah.
What works in India? Because this is, it took a very long time actually. I don't know, but you were saying 2 decades, so maybe it's okay. I'm just wondering, how long can anybody build a business like that? I mean, 20 years is just...
This problem is not in retail, it is across industries in India. India is pretty much a shallow market. There is a so-called profitable segment which you can address, which is there. But there's a large majority of the segments where it's very difficult to make a meaningful value proposition and then get a sustaining business. You take anything, if you take airlines, it's only one airline which takes 80% of the profit, another airline takes another 15% profit, and all others take 5%. You take publication. One publication makes a solid money. You know which group I'm referring to. They take more than 70% money. The next group will take another 20% money and remain to the rest. Coffee, same problem. Anything which, if you look at any big segments, you see even real estate. Few builders make real money. 80% of the builders don't actually make money. Right. So the problem is India is a shallow market. So it's important for, and it's true for retail also. In retail also, top 2 companies make 70% of the profit of the industry.
Yeah, 2 quick questions. I'll allow you to continue, but quick interventions. One is, even in the shallow market like this, there are 1 or 2 fellows who are doing well. How are they managing? One. Second. See, I mean, because, and if you look at this theory is not just India. You look at Jagdish Seth, he wrote long back this book called Rule of Three, which is not today's.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem to be, actually, I don't know if there is really space for n number of guys in any market. So are we really repeating a truism, or is there something more you can tell us about?
See, first is when you know that when I say shallow in terms of profitability, not in shallow in terms of volume. India is a huge volume market, but then that volume will remain as volume. It will not translate into profit. Okay, so profitability is shallow in India. Even today, the MD of Indigo has told the kind of tough situation India is not easy. The regulations, the difficulties, the regional disparities, you have to go through all that. So that makes it even more difficult. Solution is again what I told earlier. You should, the beginning only be clear on what target segment you're choosing, and that target segment you see it growing over the next 2 decades. And their aspiration needs you should be able to meet comfortably better than their competition. And once you lock into the target segment and their aspiration, you just don't leave the hold and keep on at it for 2 decades. If you are able to do that, because you have spotted the segment which is going to grow, and you also understood their aspiration, you have got it. You have to initially pilot, fine tune it in the first 1 year, 2 years. After that, there's no looking back. You have to keep on growing with them. Okay. And that's how you make money. That's what, when Indigo was launched, you had AirAsia, you had Deccan. Indigo never did a 99 rupee flight. They knew where they are targeting. For them, taking off on time, landing on time, a clean aircraft, fast turnaround. They have put these building blocks and they never let go of that. whatever happens, they didn't budge. So that's how they made it. If you take any leader who managed it, it doesn't happen overnight. They caught on to the key drivers which will create customer loyalty, address the target segment whom they can profitably do, and don't change your strategy for 2 decades. If they don't change the strategy for 2 decades, is a tough one.
It's a tough one. Yeah.
So to manage to do it, manage to create mega brands.
Yeah, quick one, Sir Vasant, I'll go to the others. Indigo is even today identified as an LCA, low cost airline. So I don't think that story has changed really. I mean, with others, of course. So correct. Isn't that there? So somewhere this proposition of low price is there in that.
No, there is not a low cost. It is a value. They are giving high value. See, there's a difference. Their fares actually are only marginally cheaper than anybody else. They are not very cheap.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
What they are doing is trustworthy. They don't do this gaming. Suddenly you have a release of 100 rupee tickets for 2 days, and they had to do it in between to stem the competition. But that was a tactical move which they stopped. Fundamentally, trustworthy, predictable, that's what they wanted. Similar, right. At the same time, you had AirAsia who wanted a promotion. Then they have to stick on to that. They have to keep on doing promotions, and then they build the business. But unfortunately, in India, there's not much money in that strategy.
Right. So you're saying basically keep singing Rag Goyri Todi as long as you can. I mean, that's the point. Okay. Stick to one thing and stick and do it well.
Yeah.
Suresh, what do you think? What do you think, Suresh? What are the things, is a dozen years, for instance, too long for anything to break even? Because that's the kind of time frame I saw for many of these guys to break even. And as I said, the dead bodies are more than the live ones. And obviously because of the kind of market and the country we are. But how is it that some fellows are still able to find their way through? Is the Indian customer a more value-driven customer, more price-driven customer than anybody else? Is that the really issue, or is it something else?
To some extent, like what Vasant said, you have to know, retail is a very, very simple game. You have to have a very simple proposition which should be communicated to the consumers. That's why, the 5 principles which I talked about are very simple principles. And once you pick up one principle and then communicate it very, very strongly and then stick to it on a very consistent basis, I think you will succeed. I think Vasant actually has built a very strong brand in Max. And if you ask Vasant how was the first 5-6 years, he will tell. Yeah. So, but what had happened was, you could have easily changed in the first 5-6 years. That is where I think people go wrong. And I think what really made Max successful vis-a-vis the others is being very consistent and being simple. So I think that is a very, very important principle. Till we reach a certain scale, you can't be profitable. But reaching that scale in India is much longer compared to other places, because if you really look at the per capita income of India crossed 1,000 only in 2010. So if you really look at growth of many brands, there were no brands which were 1,000 crore plus brands till 2010 in the country. Independent of the, other than the automobile, if you take any of the consumer brands, not many were 1,000 crore brands. That 1,000 rupee crossed, and we should have crossed actually 2,000 rupee per capita in 2018. So if you really look at the growth of retail in any of the markets, whether it is China, whether it is Thailand or any of the countries, the organized retail really kicks off only after a per capita income of around $2,000. And then, it actually really, turns profitable when the per capita goes to $4,000 to $5,000, which is what China is today. So we are still, stuck. We have not even crossed $2,000. So with just 1,000, and we have taken more than 10 years to move from 1,000 to 2,000. So that means, you cannot be profitable because large percentage of the population cannot afford to buy things. So you cannot be profitable. So that means you have to play the waiting game. And how many corporates have that ability to play the waiting game? There are only few. That's why you find, not many are able to really, sustain this kind of a thing. So it's a question of, and also another problem in India is the real estate cost in India doesn't match with the productivity of India. India can only deliver a certain productivity. We may say that it can, if you deliver say $200 to $300 productivity, it is very good in India. Even $400 is something which is outstanding. Whereas $400 is a bare minimum in any of the international markets. I'm not talking about US and Europe. I'm talking about even say Malaysia or Thailand kind of market. So as long as you have productivity which is around $150 to $200, and you have a rent which is not very different from the international rentals, then the entire equation changes completely. So it is a waiting game. You keep it simple, be consistent, and then you will be able to deliver it. But you should have the deep pockets to sort of wait through during that period when you are consistent, when you know that it's not working. So you may always wanted to try something new.
Quick bullet point answers for these two questions. What, in your view, is a timeline that can be allowed in India? One, given the kind of industry it is, why are so many fellows rushing into it and bruising themselves?
No, I would say that 10 years is a good enough time for you to turn successful. I think 8 to 10 years is what I think you should keep it. So India, actually, you typically again go by the per capita. What I call as a per capita problem, because when you say look at India, and then I'll just give one example of when we came with ice cream in Hindustan Lever. When we did the calculation for ice cream market, the size of the market at that point in time was 25 million liters. Then we benchmarked Pakistan and said that if our per capita income goes to the level of Pakistan, it's not that we benchmarked it to any of the developed countries. So Pakistan, then the market could be 100 million liters, which means 4x. So the entire assumption is that getting per capita consumption of ice cream to Pakistan should not be a major issue. And if you do that, then we are in a 4x market. So this is a mistake many people have done, and many people don't understand. But India is a terribly value market. Consumers are very intelligent; they will just not pay. So you have to give the best product at the lowest price.
So you struggled for a lot of years, yeah. Okay.
So I think this is where you will have to get that proposition right. That's why you have to keep it very simple, so that at least you cut out all the frills, and then keep your cost structure as lean as possible and deliver that value to the consumers.
Right.
It's what actually Indigo has done in a way.
Yeah.
Very.
Which one, sir? What is it?
Indigo has done. Their business model is very simple. I just want to make sure that my flight goes on time.
A to B.
More than 20 minutes to turn around when others were doing 45 minutes to 1 hour.
Ashish, same questions. I mean, what's your sense?
My take is a little different over here.
Yeah.
While I agree with what Vasant and Suresh have spoken, I'll give an academic answer and little philosophical over here. I have been observing this industry for more than 20 years now. See, the thing is, one of the major mistakes that many of the retailers as well as the consulting firms do while looking at India is that telling India is one country. Actually, India is not one country. When we are talking about retail, every 10 kilometers, language changes. Every 10 kilometers, profession changes, life changes. Even the consumption habits change. So, guys, I'll quote Gordon Gekko over here. Greed is good. Greed not necessarily good in a global scenario over here. Localized, I have one shop over here. I run it successfully. I get customers, lock in. There is more demand. I open another shop half a kilometer away, another shop. So in what we talk about the trading area. So within the trading area, I can run 2, 3, 4 stores based on the demand, and my lock-in consumers make it profitably. The moment I start thinking that the same model is another city, forget about another city, even another part of the city, that is where I start falling. So the rush is because one of the model is successful. For me, I start thinking that this model is replicable, which is not true. In India, what works is micro segmentation. Even I would say nano segmentation. which means we're talking about super customization. Customers are very price conscious. Customers look for quality, they look for value. All these things are correct. But the mistake that the answer to your question, why so many dead bodies? Because greed. I think it is a market. Bottom of the pyramid. I get McKinsey report. I get Bain's report. I get PwC report. This is the potential of the market. What I'm doing, why I'm not doing it. So people get into it. But one model in one city is not replicable in another city. That is the major problem that I understand in this. That's the reason why so many people, so many dead bodies, and people are bruised left, right, and center. So when you are talking about a 10-year, 15-year period, eventually you understand this wisdom comes on you. Eventually this wisdom comes on you, and you understand that how much scale that I can comfortably do to make money, and where I see that, I don't want to do all these things. So if you talk about department stores in India, initially all started to follow the American model, big box retail model, 50,000, 100,000 square feet, 200,000 square feet. The bigger that's what is the status symbol. Now we are coming back to 25,000, 15,000.
That's
smart department stores with the capacity constraint, and of course the real estate price. All these things are true, but the underlying philosophy you are not understanding. The underlying philosophy is because a Kirana store in this area is not equivalent to a Kirana store 20 kilometers away, unless you are only talking about price. The Indigo example, what you are talking about, we are playing on the low price. So everybody wants a low price. If I have an option of paying lower price versus higher price, unless I'm going for a luxury brand, I don't want to pay a higher price. So unless you are playing on that particular field, then it is a global market. Whether it is India, America, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, everywhere it's going to work.
Yeah, quick answer, Mishraji. And that is the scale at the state size. Is that good enough actually for a retail firm? What's your sense of what your example?
No, I don't think the scale state size. One state is even not one state.
So
if you look at, you have to micro segment. You have to understand the customers. So that is why the online one becomes easier now.
So you're saying we have to go to the online thing. So we might, right. So now let's start that story. Okay, now I'll start with you, Ashish, since you are there anyway. What do you think is the story of online? Will it cut into the offline thing, or will they do a Salim Zaved kind of Jugalbandi? Is it we started with a lot of offline and then went into online? Will it be more and more of online and a bit of offline? What is your sense?
No, see, it's even when you're talking about America, still about 90% of the customers, they go to the supermarket or they go to a department store and buy items for their regular purchase. Maybe the replacement purchase or whatever else that they might be doing sometimes online. So it's not really a case that the online will kill the offline. It is going to increase the market. The market.
But then you can see, Ashish, that's correct. But then you can see that actually that after Amazon came in, Walmart was terribly worried, and also they started losing footfalls. They took over Flipkart and a whole lot of others. So it's not as if it's not eating one. The other thing is this 90% or whatever is as stands today. But 10 years down the line, you think it's the same? It will be the same story, US, anywhere in the world.
No, so see, the COVID has created a different situation altogether, because of which there could be fundamental changes to lifestyle. So if a country like India, if you're looking at it, probably for next 8 years or 10 years, if there is COVID in the country in some form or the other, and the social distancing and all that things are still there, you have to wear mask and shield and gloves and sanitization and all that. So probably the purchasing behavior will change. And then the experiential thing that happens inside the touch, the feel and all. I remember before the mango season started, one of the directive from Government of India is please don't smell the mango. Because people normally smell the mango to know that whether it is ripe or not, that sweet smell is there or not. Now, the directive is don't smell the mango. So that means the reason why I would go to a supermarket to touch, feel, smell and all that is going. That's not there anymore. So in this context, probably whatever I am telling, whatever anyone is telling, that may not hold true. we may see a completely different type of retail 5 years or 10 years down the line. But assuming we continue the way we are telling that there is a point, say 2022, March 31st, COVID is done, and then we are back to normal. If that scenario is there, then the online and offline will coexist. Yes, what you are telling is true. Everybody is talking about why Walmart is worried, because Walmart has been a physical retailer. They do the bulwark kind of a thing. And if you're talking about Amazon is a digital retailer. Amazon is not really profitable, but the share price increases. That is the most valued company, and all that kind of thing happens. So Walmart gets worried. But the core competence of Walmart is physical store. The core competence of Walmart is the Amazon is digital. Amazon wants to open physical stores with Amazon Go. Walmart wants to go digital by getting Flipkart. So essentially, if you allow me to be a little impolite, the initial part of retail in India, and the example of the great Biani, who started with Big Bazaar, if you look at the first part, he had his hand on all possible pies. He had food store, he had electronics, he had apparel, he had online, he had insurance, what and what not. So the idea over there is that even if one doesn't work, something else will work. So my business will keep running. But eventually you see what happened. That didn't work. So this is an experimental phase over here where everybody is telling that we want to be omnichannel. To me, omnichannel is not really going to be that big a factor. It's kind of a fact. And identifying the same customer across channels, starting from Kirana store all the way to high-end departmental store and luxury mall, I don't think it is that easy. Maybe one or two guys will be able to do it consistently. Otherwise, we will be having multi-channel consistently. But omnichannel is not going to really take off in the way it's conceptualized. Somebody will be able to do, not everybody. So everybody will experimenting. So this is the experimental phase.
They'll find some sweet spot, and then probably stop at some point of time. But then we are all guessing right now.
Absolutely.
Will it be 70-30, 70 online and 30 retail, 30 offline, let's say 10, 15 years down the line? I'll not hold you to this, but I want you to take a shot at what will happen in future.
See, I again go back to what I said. It all depends upon the shopping behavior of your target customer. If you have gone into a white collar, upper middle class, tech savvy, young family who wants to consume, but in the current situation and the anticipated next kind of environment, if the customer starts behaving 30-70, that's your target. So the customer will order 30 digital, online, omni, and buy 70 physical. There may be certain type of customers who are more concerned about the touch and feel, more about the promotion deals which they have to check out. There may be 80-20. So there is no one rule about 30-70, 80-20 or 50-50. It's like there's no one India. When Suresh said $2,000, Bihar is $600. Whereas South and West, they are close to $3,000. So 1:5 in terms of the per capita income, of household income. So likewise, even the consumption behaviors will change. A family with both of them working definitely will order more online for all products.
I get it. So what you're saying is,
you should understand their consumption pattern. Then you should suit your channel. See, go where the customers are and shop the way offer the way they shop. So you tune your offering to push for 30-70, which means you connect with marketplace, you do your own investment of your own site, then promote social media. So you orient everything to suit that 30-70.
I get that, but just look at this. As it is in India, there are more mobiles than there are toilets. Okay, one. Second, now I agree with you that the eastern part of the country is a little more media dark and this dark and whatever, IT dark and so on. But still, if you look at it in South and West, especially, Paytm and some of these things have taken off big time. It will take some time for in East, but I'm saying over a period of time, please understand what's happening to the customer, because you are the boss. I'll listen to what you say. In the sense that the customer is getting, what is this fellow? Why should he do anything here? You sit and, it's the same chips packet, bloody hell. What is this? Just press a return and it will come home. Unless I want to consume it now, that's there. There are a bunch of things like that. But I'm saying, is the pie not coming down now? I mean, in terms of this is getting more and more, the elephant in the room is somehow, whether you like it or not, this, because it's pressing in that direction. Of course, COVID, as I said, is only quickening that story. What do you say?
More important is this organized, unorganized. Why you are saying, a lot of people are still rushing to India. India is the only biggest populated country with very poor organized retail. Most of the segments, the organized retail are single digits or low double digits. So there's a huge unorganized sector in every price segment and product categories, which are waiting to be converted. And when online is saying they want to double every year, it is possible because there is a switch happening from unorganized to organized. People in the organized sector are increasingly going digital. So their pie is expanding in terms of organized retail or organized consumption in India. So that has attraction for all the players. And those who are able to get the right target customers, their media behavior, their consumption behavior, and latch on to it, they are going to win. And you have not talked about the new one, no, which is the D2C, which Ashish started. D2C is going to become big. They are saying the next 5 to 6 years, it's going to be $100 billion. Today, it's the double digit in terms of turnover. $100 billion D2C, both FMCG as well as apparel brands. And you see a lot of apparel attempts being done. There are aggregators, there are what you call curated platforms who are focusing on D2C brands. So they are going to be very big in the next 5, 6 years. Again, organized, unorganized conversions and continuing aspirations. So these two are the fundamental drivers for the next 20 years for India.
Right. Suresh, what's your view on this? I mean, where will this settle? We know that this is not, the story is not the same everywhere. But this thing that Mishraji was saying will be much more easy now that we have digital, meaning thereby, I know the customer. In fact, today the story is a Google or probably a Facebook actually knows whether you're listening to Justin Bieber or Bhaja Govindam in the morning. And they don't care what your age is. All the fellows who are listening to Bhaja Govindam is one bunch of fellows. All the fellows listening to Justin Bieber is one thing. I'll pipe one bunch of products to them. So they actually know probably more about us than we know ourselves. So now, given this, is micro-segmentation much more easy? And therefore, going to retail through digital is much more easy than the offline thing, where you can certainly build a great experience and so on. You can always back it up with that. But what is happening? What is your sense?
See, I think, today, we should not even talk, I would say online and offline is a outdated philosophy. I think we should only think about the consumer and then understand, where the consumer is buying. And your brand should be present. If the consumer is buying online, your brand should be present there. If you're buying offline, the brand should be present there. And most of the purchases could be digitally started, may end up, offline, or could have started offline and ended up in digital. So I think first we should not even, start talking about, how much, 70-30 and all. I think it's a old philosophy. So we should not even talk about, 70-30. And I think we should just focus in a single manner, focus and say that how I understand the consumer better and better, and then target, my communication to the customer, my product to the consumer. So if you really look at the way the digital has evolved, see, this COVID, of course, accelerated the whole thing. But even before COVID, online was growing at around 28% CAGR, and modern retail was growing at around 4 to 5 CAGR. So obviously, the market share of online retail has gone up. So it's not the overall market has grown at 28%. It is the online which has grown at 28%, vis-a-vis 6 to 7% of offline. Even in that 6 to 7%, there may be a portion which has got fulfilled through an online means, from a click and collect or ordering from the store. So there is a very, very clear shift towards digital. So we should be aware of that, and then our entire physical expansion should actually keep that in mind. before really going full hog and then expanding in physical, thinking that everything will come back to the olden days after COVID. As such, the shift was moving towards digital. It's not that COVID, of course, accelerated it by maybe 5 years, but as such, there are 200 million consumers who are buying online in India before COVID, and it's a market which is a $80 billion. Is around. See, organized retail in physical form took almost 20 years to reach around 8 to 10% percentage of retail, whereas digital has done that within 5-6 years. So actually, what is now happening is, when you talked about a micro segment, that is, I would say, is the next stage. I think India is still very much a horizontal market. When I say horizontal, I'm talking more about an Amazon and Flipkart actually corner, most of the business. But there are, if you really look at the international market is actually moving away from horizontals into more, people who understand the consumers and then tailor-made proposition to a consumer. 2 examples I can give you. One is Stitch Fix, which is in the fashion space. They are a subscription model. They understand the consumer so much that they send out maybe 20 apparel or fashion items. It could be a combination of apparel, footwear, and handbags every month, and say that whatever, based on your background, based on your usage pattern, these are the 20 apparel we feel is good for you. This is for the party. This is for going to office. This is for this. You pick up whatever you want and return the balance. Then there is a proposition for beauty called Birchbox, which again do the same thing. I will send you this box which contains whatever it is, different beauty items, and you take whatever you want and return the balance. So that is the real micro segment. And for example, Starbucks does it today. Starbucks communication actually goes to millions, and they micro segment their communication to millions of customers. If they have whatever 1 billion customer, the communication is actually automated to 1 billion customer. And it's not that we are far away from those kind of propositions. In fact, we also use in some of our brands where we are able to micro segment based on the consumer usage pattern. It, of course, is better as long as you're a pure online player, because you understand the consumer behavior right through. Whereas if you're a physical retailer, you understand the consumer behavior when they come to your store. Otherwise, you don't understand. So there is a limitation of understanding the consumer behavior when you're on offline vis-a-vis online. But I think very, very important analytics, and then using AI to really micro target a consumer is going to become a big thing as we go forward. And India, in a way, will sort of jump many of the steps in between which the others went through. Because the time it took for organized retail, we talk about 10 years here. Many markets, including US, has gone that for 50-60 years. And then moved to digital. Whereas our digital moved pretty quickly. I mean, we are on par with anyone else, except maybe for this specialized players like a Stitch Fix or a Birchbox and all that. But I think they will also come pretty quickly to India. So we should be very, very prepared that retail is going to be very different. This online, offline, thinking online will come back, offline will come back after COVID and all is a misnomer. I think we should not even think online and offline, and just focus on the customer and understanding the customer, and then be present wherever the customer is, and then communicate in a very, very sharp manner, understanding the consumer and their usage pattern. Right. Because this mass media advertising over a period of time will become a passe. It's going to be like, very, very focused, advertising, direct advertising, and then to some extent social media advertising.
Right. Ashish ji, this is the same thing, but let's put it differently. Can you think of how do you mix these two things together? I mean, we are now said already, don't worry about online, offline, let the proportion settle itself. We are not bothered about it. Okay, so let it come to some kind of an equilibrium. But how do you create this, this jugalbandi of where the, one feeds into the other, and you get a kind of...
Weiler, I will just correct you. It is not a question of settling the equilibrium. You should say that, see, any brand, my target is I should get 100% market share, let's say.
No, I'm saying that's right. That's right. I'm saying let it settle wherever it settles. I'm not worried at all. I'll go to the customer.
Talk about the 70, 30, 20, 80 and all that.
It doesn't matter really. I mean, that's what the point. I mean, it probably doesn't matter. It will be one thing in this market, it's one thing, some other market, in one kind of retail, it is one thing in other kind of retail. So there's no number at all. So that's the point. So the thing I'm asking Mishra ji is this: how do you create a kind of an experience putting these two things together? Because it gives you tremendous ability now.
It is already there. It's already there in place where Suresh is talking about little high end with Birchbox and all that. But at a lower end, this kind of things, micro segmentation and kind of the synergistic behavior, it is already started in it. For example, I will take an example of a simple thing, one online portal called Delight Foods. Delight Foods is a player in India. It is a food aggregator in terms of snacks and sweets and something that is not quickly perishable. And what it is doing is it is categorizing based on occasions in your website and categorizing based on the locations. So north, south, east, west, within north, every city, every state, and then whatever is the specialty of that, it is available. Yeah. So actually you can order that Jamshedpur ka Fakira Chanachur mujhe 1 kilo chahiye. या फिर कटक का मुझे some particular kind of sweet मुझे चाहिए.
You can name a shop?
They actually have the names of the shop over there.
Right. So that's really the interesting part.
So now the synergy is automatically there. So those guys, they are increasing their business to Bikaner Bhujia. Bikaner Bhujia available in Bangalore. Now that guy increases the market all the way till Bangalore, and a customer in Bangalore can have all possible kind of things, which means actually the customers are micro-segmented into the geographic locations, into cities, into localities, and specifically probably my locality is that particular shop. I can buy items sitting over here. So yes, so online, offline kind of merges, it is already started. I mean, we are not talking about that way that Delight Food actually can give me a suggestion that today it is this particular festival and also shall I order this thing for you and deliver it to you or give it a box to me. Probably that is next in line. But at a very crude level, this already has started. So the synergy, people do see that synergy kind of thing, that it is better for me. I'm not averse, even though I am a halwai in Delhi, but I'm not averse to connecting with an online portal and increasing my business.
That is actually, online has made the market all India. I think what I think is more evolved is, for example, in a way, to some extent, the recommendations given by the website is also in a way personalization. So these are, I would say the basic level of targeting a consumer, understanding their usage, and then targeting. So now much more, for example, we only talk about fashion brands in Amazon, Myntra, Flipkart. There are 25 to 30 fashion brands which are doing 30-40 crores of business purely by targeting really nano segment. For example, someone will be just focusing on dresses of just one sized oversized women, for example. So there are many such propositions, which have started, evolving. So that micro segment will take some more time. But as I told you earlier, India will jumpstart many of those things quite quickly compared to the other countries.
We'll go to the next level. That is the question. In fact, I wanted to ask you to Vasant, because this is at the first level, but when you go to the next level, you start having facial recognition of the customers through camera. And then if the fellow smiles, I mean, it is generally known that he buys 30% more. Some of this stuff is already known. So, is something like that going on in India? Of course, abroad it is, but is something like that going on in India?
India definitely is catching up, as Suresh said, compared to Western countries. India will not take that much time to get advanced technologies. The fundamental network is there. So, in fact, I know of one startup which is using AI in fashion. What that startup is doing is, it connects to individual customers. It there is initial time you have to spend to share your interests, tastes, preferences, and all that AI will capture. And after that, it will start throwing recommendations of apparel which you want. And it will keep on learning as you reject or accept. And over a period of time, it will become your, what do you call, stylist, personal stylist. So those kind of trends, if I have personal stylist and it keeps improving my purchase and make it better, I will use that AI-powered stylist. No? So you will have these things happening. And now that can be backed by the brand's offering. And accordingly, the brands can learn what the customer might need for the next season and accordingly buy it, rather than the traditional way of fashion trend spotting and doing the normal scanning and then launching the merchandise, hoping that this will get sold, which never have worked. Even today in the fashion market, 50% of production is being discounted. 50%. There's only 50% which is being sold at full price. So there's enough AI can do to increase the strike rate.
Okay, Ashish, I'll come to you the same question. Can you think of some guys who are doing it very well abroad and in India? Both ways. I mean, from your experience, you have seen some literature, whatever. Can you? Is there something that has done very smart stuff actually globally and in India?
Couple of things that the fashion guys actually, Suresh and Vasant, they can talk about better than me is the digital mirrors or whatever they say, that in which you can change your whatever dresses that you want. You don't actually, so that reduces the store space, and you can put whatever designs, whatever kind of apparels, your accessories and all, and take the photo and share it in social media and get the likes, and based on that you make your choice. So that is that kind of things are getting on quite high. Other than that, the mobile phones app tracking, I think that is the one that is making the biggest difference in Indian market now. So most of the stores now are going to apps. And then the combination of this, like super apps, like this Paytm super apps or Airtel super apps or Amazon super apps, the super app, in which you have got a bunch of other apps together. And they start tracking you when you are in the vicinity or nearby in the store area and all, and start giving you push notifications and all. But I don't think it has evolved that much in India until now. It is still a pretty traditional that way kind of a thing. SMSs come, people don't really read it. I mean, people send it because they're supposed to send, but people don't really read it. So it has not see, the guys who are there in the social media, in the Facebook, in Twitter, in Instagrams, and all those places, they get the recommendation from there, then they go to the store, connect it. That is a different category of consumers. But if you're talking about we have got about how much 80% of rural areas in the country. So we are still looking at pretty much traditional kind of thing, and this has not reached a level where it will make a difference.
What do you think, Suresh? What's your sense of the same thing?
See, I think unfortunately, the retail wanted to copy exactly what maybe an online player will get to know about the consumer. So the retail utopia is typically like, there are, I would say in India itself, maybe 20 to 30, or from my knowledge, it could be even more, startups which are working on facial recognition. Yeah. There are many which are working on, you go to the store. The ultimate utopia is that you pick up, from the mobile, from the mobile of the person who is entering the store. And then we are able to pick up his buying habits and communicate to the store manager. Like YLR has now come to the store, his buying habit is this, so attend to him like this. So that is the ultimate utopia, but this is like, struggling actually too hard. And there are many examples. What had happened is people, started looking at, online and offline. How do I give the same experience of online to offline? And many people, started doing things which are like, I can do a nice presentation saying that, my store has got all these things. but it will not even give probably point not 1% of sales or build customer royalty. For example, there is a one brand called Rebecca Minkoff, which is sort of touted as the ultimate in digital store experience. Like as soon as you enter the store, you have a huge screen where you sort of says that so and so has entered. You touch that, then it will ask you what you want: coffee you want, coke you want. So actually, then you can actually pick up things, and then those items will be kept in the trial room and all that. But see, these things, it's all fine. You can have one store. You can. It is not really attracting the customer, and more so
Right.
because I think the entire paradigm is now changing. Earlier, our retail is all about how much time you make the customer to stay inside retail. More that person will buy. Today, how fast we can send out that person. So that's the whole game plan, and I don't think things are going to change very dramatically for another 2 to 3 years at least. And by the time the digital habit would have set in very, very strongly. So I think this facial recognition, magic mirrors are all very good from presentation point of view, but they will not add much to the sales. I think more important is if you're able to provide, the simple things like a click and collect, simple things like, you provide social media, you empower your store team to communicate with, because most of the store team people have their own set of customers whom they know very well. So you empower them to communicate with them, which is now called as conversational commerce. So these are actually will give you immediate sale because they are familiar with the storeroom chap. So they are able to communicate, and then they are able to post the catalog, because the showroom guy will know that this customer will like these 10 dresses which has now come. So they can post those 10 dresses in the WhatsApp, and then take order. These are something which will give immediate result, but not magic mirrors and facial recognition and those things. Still not there.
Yeah. Touch point experience
may not work in the future, but definitely technology is not there today.
Right. Another couple of questions that we'll close. Vasant, tell me, digital and both of them are there now. I mean, we are in it for good now. Okay, so why don't we do this then? Why don't we take your closing comments, Vasant? Okay. I'll take yours, and then Suresh, and then Ashish. I'll have. Go ahead and let's hear you.
I heard a recent talk by Philip Kotler. He was talking about his new book, H to H, Human to Human. Over the past 50 years, he has done marketing 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, and this is now he's 90. Okay, now he says that today there is no more product. Everything is service. Anything you render to the customer is service. Means for a customer, you are providing an instant total solution for his or her problem or aspiration. If you see that in context, then all this physical, digital, online of everything will automatically get addressed. That particular customer has a certain lifestyle, certain time at the disposal, certain money at the disposal, certain experience the customer wants, certain speed in which they want that to be addressed, and that customer has competing offerings. Now, when you are clear about your target customer, your job is to connect with one-on-one. Literally, as Ashish said, it's like almost nano segmentation for each customer. It is possible today in the digital world. We are talking about all the old PNG development cycle, all are trash now. Today it is direct. He says prosumers are deciding the brands, what is required to be. So it has
Personalization.
Yes, personalization and predictive. It has gone to the next level. You found a need today and address it tomorrow. So it is now on the go. You predictive need and addressing it live. So that is what he's talking about human to human marketing. So if you see in the context, that's how the world is moving.
Right.
And between countries, the digital divide was there, which is closing very rapidly.
Right.
And then maybe 3 years from now, we will talk about 5G being piloted in cities. So when machines talk to each other. So when you are in that mode, the human also changes the expectation. Once you are clear about the changing expectation and the aspirations, you have to change your offering, which is combination of product, service, and delivery. Everything is together, bundled, and ensure that you stay competitive and ensure that while you do it, you also remain viable.
Right.
No point in doing things which are not going to make you.
You have to quickly find a way of getting out also. Yeah.
So you should do both the front end and back end working and ensure that you are viable
Yep.
and strong enough to sustain long term.
Right, sir. Suresh.
I would say a single most important thing is going to be about understanding your customer 100%, because we are collecting data so much today. I think understanding the customer so much, and then really micro segmenting that customer is going to be a big I would say main success factor for the future, because customer, I think see, for example, we talk about Zara and H&M. Quietly, there's a Chinese brand called Shein, which I think there are multiple, there is no fixed number to their sales, but anything, it's touted anything between $10 billion to $15 billion dollars. Whereas Zara is a $20 billion or H&M and Zara are $20 billion brands. So they actually turn around a fashion product, which used to be a cycle time of 9 months, in 5 to 7 days. Whereas Zara does it in 30 days, which used to be a historic thing. So people are now turning it around so fast using technology, exactly what the consumer wants. For example, you have brands like ASOS and Boohoo and all that. They actually make a product, make only say 25 pieces of that. They put it up on the website, take orders, and then actually manufacture. So these are the models which are going to be successful in the future, because we are not going to be stuck with 50% which is unsold, and then you sell it at a discount. If that 25 gets an order of say 2,000, you produce 2,000. If it is 10,000, you produce 10,000. If it gets 10, you chuck 15.
Right.
So these are the agile models which are going to really
coming
work.
A new bunch of.
Yeah, the core is going to be understanding the consumer quite intimately.
Right. Mr. Ajay, last word.
After all this discussion, it all comes down to the basic of marketing, what Kotler told right in the beginning, understanding the customer and providing them with whatever he requires. So now the way and means of understanding the customer is changing, and the way we are providing with the requirement, that is changing. So speed is coming into picture, time is coming into picture, more customization is coming into picture, but basics is still pretty much the same. So the clarity of thought for anybody, whether it is a store brand or a retail brand, clarity of thought, clarity of execution, and understanding the customer requirement to the best possible. I think that is the way forward.
Add one thing to that. See, I think ultimately it is from manufacturer to the consumer. So there are so many in-between steps. It could be channels, it could be promotion, it could be anything else. But that is what I think, that two broad things, manufacturer to the consumer may not change. But all the in-between things are changing completely. But understanding and getting an intimate knowledge of the customer
ultimately
is ultimate. In those days, you can't get it as much the way you can get it, because you don't have the social media. But now your understanding can be far superior.
Thank you very much, sir. Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
We'll just see how the story develops for India. So I'll come back to you for a second edition. So we'll then plan it at some time which is convenient to all of us. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Suresh.
Bye-bye.
Bye.